in a dense forest where ancient oaks stretched their mighty branches toward the sky, and crystal streams wound their way through carpets of moss and wildflowers, there lived a magnificent hart named Sylvanus. He was undoubtedly one of the most beautiful creatures in the entire woodland, blessed with a coat that gleamed like burnished copper in the sunlight and a graceful bearing that made him the envy of all other deer. But Sylvanus's most striking feature was his spectacular set of antlers. They were enormous, perfectly symmetrical, and branched in the most elegant patterns imaginable. Each point was sharp and polished, and the entire rack caught the light in such a way that it seemed almost to glow with an inner radiance. Sylvanus was extremely proud of his magnificent antlers and spent considerable time each day admiring them in the reflection of the clear forest streams. He would position himself at different angles to catch the best light, turning his head this way, and that to appreciate the impressive span and beautiful curve of his crown.
Surely,
Sylvanus would say to himself as he gazed at his reflection,
no creature in all the forest possesses such magnificent headgear. These antlers mark me as truly special, as noble as any king of the woodland realm.
other deer would often gather to admire Sylvanus's impressive antlers, and he basked in their attention and praise. He loved to strut through the forest clearings where his antlers would be most visible, and he took every opportunity to display them prominently. However, while Sylvanus was completely enamored with his beautiful antlers, he felt quite differently about another part of his anatomy, his legs. Although his legs were actually perfectly proportioned for a deer, strong and swift, Sylvanus considered them disappointingly thin and unremarkable.
Look at these spindly, unattractive legs.
He would complain to his reflection in the stream.
They're so thin and plain, nothing like my magnificent antlers. How embarrassing that such a noble creature as myself should be cursed with such ungainly limbs.
Sylvanus was so focused on the supposed inadequacy of his legs that he completely failed to appreciate their true value. His legs were actually incredibly strong and capable of carrying him at tremendous speeds through the forest. They were perfectly designed for leaping over fallen logs, navigating through dense undergrowth, and outrunning predators. But Sylvanus paid no attention to these practical qualities. In his mind, his legs were simply an embarrassing contrast to his glorious antlers, and he wished he could somehow hide them while still showing off his magnificent crown. One peaceful morning, as Sylvanus was engaged in his usual routine of admiring his antlers in a secluded pool, he heard the distant sound of hunting horns echoing through the forest. A party of hunters had entered the woodland, accompanied by a pack of trained hunting hounds. At first, Sylvanus wasn't particularly concerned. He had always been confident in his ability to evade hunters, and he assumed that his superior intelligence and woodland knowledge would keep him safe from any human pursuers. However, as the sounds of the hunt grew closer, Sylvanus realized that this hunting party was more skilled and persistent than most. The dogs had apparently picked up his scent, and they were following his trail with alarming accuracy and determination. Suddenly, the peaceful morning was shattered by the sound of barking dogs bursting through the underbrush nearby. The hunters had found his location, and there was no time for careful planning or gradual retreat.
Time to leave.
Sylvanus said to himself, abandoning his reflection and preparing to flee from the approaching danger. This was the moment when Sylvanus discovered the true value of the legs he had always considered so embarrassingly inadequate. As soon as he began to run, his powerful limbs launched him forward with incredible speed and agility. His spindly legs carried him swiftly through the forest, leaping effortlessly over fallen logs, bounding across streams, and navigating through the dense undergrowth with the grace and speed that only a deer could possess. For the first time, Sylvanus began to appreciate the remarkable strength and functionality of his legs.
These legs aren't inadequate at all.
He realized as he raced through the forest.
They're saving my life. How could I have been so foolish as to be ashamed of such wonderful, capable limbs?
Unfortunately, just as Sylvanus was beginning to appreciate his legs, he discovered the hidden drawback of the antlers he had always considered his greatest asset. As he ran through the dense forest, his magnificent, wide-spreading antlers kept getting caught in low-hanging branches and thick undergrowth. The very size and complexity that made them so beautiful in open clearings now made them a serious liability in the dense woodland. Every few yards, Sylvanus had to slow down or change direction to avoid getting his antlers tangled in branches. The elaborate points and widespread that he had always admired now acted like hooks, catching on every bit of foliage he passed.
Come on.
He urged himself as he struggled to free his antlers from yet another tangle of branches.
Not now. This is no time to get stuck.
But the magnificent antlers that had been the source of so much pride were now becoming the cause of his downfall. While his legs wanted to carry him to safety at full speed, his antlers forced him to move slowly and carefully to avoid becoming hopelessly entangled. The hunting dogs were getting closer, and Sylvanus could hear the shouts of the hunters following behind them. Every second of delay caused by his antlers was bringing his pursuers closer to catching him.
My beautiful antlers.
Sylvanus panted as he fought to free himself from another tangle.
You're going to be the death of me. All this time I thought you were my greatest blessing, but now I see you might be my greatest curse.
Despite his best efforts to move quickly while avoiding entanglement, Sylvanus's progress through the dense forest was painfully slow. His antlers caught on every low branch, every thick bush, and every overhanging vine. Meanwhile, his despised legs continued to perform magnificently, providing him with strength, speed, and agility whenever his antlers weren't holding him back. But their excellent performance was being negated by the constant delays caused by his elaborate crown. Finally, in a particularly dense section of the forest where the undergrowth was thick and the branches hung low, Sylvanus's antlers became so thoroughly entangled that he couldn't free himself quickly enough. The hunting dogs caught up to him just as he was struggling to extract his magnificent rack from a complex tangle of vines and branches. As the hunters approached to claim their prize, Sylvanus had a final moment of bitter realization about the irony of his situation.
How wrong I was about everything.
He thought sadly.
The legs I was always ashamed of were actually my greatest strength. They could have carried me to safety if I had let them. And the antlers I was so proud of were actually my greatest weakness in this moment of crisis.
The other deer in the forest learned a valuable lesson from Sylvanus's fate. They realized that true value doesn't always lie in what looks most beautiful or impressive, but often in what serves the most practical and important functions. The wise old doe who had often watched Sylvanus preening by the stream gathered the younger deer to share the lesson of his story. We often despise what is most useful to us, while valuing what proves to be our destruction.